Okay, so let's unpack this. Today, we're doing a deep dive, really looking hard at what's actually going on inside our correctional facilities. Our mission, basically, is to sift through this big Department of Justice report on the Fulton County Jail, and also connect it to some pretty alarming news about recent jail escapes. We want to distill the really crucial stuff for you.
Exactly. We're trying to see the bigger picture, linking these official findings with what's happening on the ground, to kind of reveal the systemic issues underneath it all.
Yeah.
And the sources we've got, well, they don't hold back.
No, you're not kidding. I mean, the DOJ report on Fulton County Jail kicks off with this incredibly blunt line: the jail is a crisis. Just like that.
Wow. Straight out of the gate.
Yeah, and that hits hard, especially when you think about recent news, like those 10 inmates who just vanished from the Orleans Parish Jail, slipped out through a hole behind a toilet, apparently.
And then you've got the almost mythical escape from Alcatraz back in '62, which still fascinates people. Plus, there was this other worrying report about a maintenance worker getting threatened somewhere. So I guess the big question we're tackling is, what's really going on behind the headlines in these official reports? What's the actual story inside our jails?
It's such an important question, and that DOJ report on Fulton County gives us a really detailed and, frankly, pretty disturbing look at one facility that's just struggling massively.
Struggling feels like, well, maybe an understatement. Let's talk about overcrowding first. So the main jail there was designed for about, 1,125 people?
Around that, yep.
But they were routinely packing in over 2,000.
Yeah.
Get this. In May 2022, 366 people were literally sleeping on the floor.
366, just wow.
Now, okay, the numbers did drop a bit, down to around 1,800 by August of this year. But, and this is key, it wasn't because things got better overall. It was because whole sections of the jail became uninhabitable.
Uninhabitable, sewage backups, raw sewage flooding, constant repairs needed, even fire damage in some parts. So fewer people, yeah, but only because parts of the building were basically unusable. The core problem, too many people in a crumbling place, it's still there. It's like a pressure cooker.
Absolutely. And that overcrowding, it's not just about space. It makes everything else worse, doesn't it? It strains resources, increases tension.
Definitely. And another thing the report hammers home is how long people are stuck there.
Right. This isn't just overnight stays we're talking about.
No way. Back in January 2023, nearly a quarter of the people locked up there had already been inside for a year or longer.
A quarter for over a year.
Yeah. And the average stay as of March this year was 279 days, almost 9 months on average. We're talking about people held for multiple years, some, believe it or not, over a decade.
A decade, waiting for trial.
Well, here's the kicker. It's mostly a pretrial facility. As of July 2024, only 2% of the people there were actually serving a sentence, the vast majority, waiting for their case to move through the system.
So people are doing serious time, prison-level time, before even being convicted.
Exactly. It's functioning like a de facto prison for hundreds who haven't had their day in court yet. It really makes you question the whole innocent until proven guilty thing, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. And, tying it back, these long stays just feed the overcrowding, strain the resources even more. It's a vicious cycle. But beyond those systemic issues, the report paints a really grim picture of violence inside.
Yeah, grim is the word. It sounds incredibly dangerous. Homicides, stabbings, assaults, and whatever. The report says they're common. Not rare, common.
That's terrifying.
There was one 24-hour period, August 2023, where at least 7 people got stabbed and 1 person was killed in one day.
Unbelievable.
And what's really tragic is that many of the homicide victims had known serious mental illnesses, and they'd been locked up for months already. The violence seems to be getting worse, too. They had more emergency transports for assaults in the first 9 months of 2023 than in all of 2022 combined.
So it's escalating. What's driving this? The report must point to some causes.
Oh, it does. Several things, really converging. A huge one is understaffing. Severe understaffing.
How bad are we talking?
Often just 1 or 2 guards for a whole housing unit. And these units hold 150 to 250 people.
1 or 2 officers for up to 250 people. That's impossible. That's way below minimum standards, surely.
Way below. The DOJ directly links this lack of staff to violence. They say incidents happened because officers just weren't there to supervise, to step in. Not enough eyes and ears, basically. Conflicts escalate, emergencies aren't handled, rules aren't enforced. It creates this environment where violence can just flourish.
Okay, so staffing is a huge factor. What else?
Well, compounding that, there's no real system to classify people properly. They're not effectively separating known violent individuals from more vulnerable ones.
So predators and prey mixed together.
Seems like it. Gang activity is mentioned as a big problem, but the way they assign housing doesn't really seem to account for that risk. It's like they're just hoping for the best.
Which clearly isn't working.
Not at all. And then you add the physical state of the jail itself. It's literally falling apart. Hundreds of broken door locks. Hundreds.
Broken locks, so people can just move around.
Yeah, unauthorized movement. Then there are these pipe chases, spaces for pipes where people can easily grab pipes and use them as weapons.
Oh my God. Makeshift weapons readily available.
And get this, burned holes in windows. People were using them to get contraband delivered by drones from the outside.
Drones. Seriously. That sounds like something out of a movie.
Right. It paints this picture of a facility just riddled with security holes, literally crumbling.
And those holes, those facility issues, they obviously make it easier for contraband to get in. You mentioned drones, but are there other ways?
Yeah, the report points to the facility issues, but also, sadly, corrupt staff members bringing stuff in. And this contraband fuels more problems. They specifically mention something called strips paper soaked in chemicals. Apparently, it causes absolute chaos and violence when it circulates.
So crumbling building, not enough staff, easy contraband. It's a perfect storm.
It really is a systemic breakdown. And it's not just violence between inmates. The DOJ also found a disturbing pattern of excessive force by the officers themselves.
Against the incarcerated people.
Yes. The report details numerous cases of force that seemed completely unnecessary, disproportionate, often with no attempt to de-escalate first.
Like what kind of examples?
Really disturbing ones. An officer choking a woman during booking. She wasn't threatening anyone, choking her until she passed out. Using tasers repeatedly on people who weren't actively resisting commands, things like that.
That's awful. And was there any accountability for this?
Apparently very little. The report says there's a systemic lack of proper review. Supervisors almost never found that officers acted outside of policy, even when body cam footage seemed to show clear excessive force. It points to a major failure in oversight. Just no real checks and balances.
So violence from other inmates, violence from staff. What about just the basic living conditions?
Terrible. Truly unacceptable, inhumane is the word the report implies. Widespread unsanitary conditions, broken sinks, broken toilets leading to constant flooding, lack of running water sometimes.
Just basic sanitation failures.
Yeah. Poor air quality too. Dust, mold, mildew everywhere. Exposed electrical wires, creating fire and electrocution risks. And severe pest infestations. Lice, cockroaches. The report mentions them specifically.
It sounds like a public health nightmare. You can only imagine the impact on people's health.
Exactly, and the report confirms that. The findings on medical care are just devastating, grossly inadequate.
Inadequate how? Like slow response times or...
Much worse than that. A systemic failure, it says, to provide adequate treatment, proper testing, getting people to specialists when needed, following up on conditions. It led to deaths.
People died because of the lack of medical care.
Yes. The report highlights the tragic death of a man named Mr. Thompson. He was severely neglected, covered in lice. Just horrific neglect of his medical needs led to his death. Another person, identified as AA, died from untreated hyponatremia, basically a severe electrolyte imbalance and seizures. These weren't unavoidable tragedies. They stemmed from systemic failures in medical attention.
That's just appalling. Beyond words.
And it wasn't just about missing big diagnoses. The report also flagged serious risks in how medication was given out and a failure to give proper medical help in emergencies. Even the medical units where the sickest people were supposed to be were dangerously understaffed.
So even if you were in the medical wing, you weren't necessarily safe for getting proper care.
Doesn't sound like it. And these deep problems extended to mental health care, too.
Which is critical in a jail population, where rates of mental illness are often high.
Exactly. The jail environment itself is described as actively harmful for people with mental health needs, and there's a severe lack of adequate treatment, lack of rehabilitative services.
So people are getting worse, not better.
It seems that way. This population is incredibly vulnerable in such a chaotic, under-resourced place. The report gives this heartbreaking example. A man with schizophrenia was released directly from the jail while he was in an active state of psychosis.
Released onto the streets like that? With no support.
Apparently. It highlights massive failures in discharge planning, no medication, no support lined up. It just increases the risk of something terrible happening or them ending up right back inside. It's setting people up to fail.
It sounds completely counterproductive. Aside from being inhumane, what about things like solitary confinement? Was that an issue?
Yes, restrictive housing, as they call it. Another major concern. The conditions in those units pose a, quote, substantial risk of serious harm. That includes self-injury, developing acute mental illness, and they were often used for people who already had serious mental illness.
So putting the most vulnerable people in the most damaging conditions.
It seems that way. And even for kids, 17-year-olds were placed in restrictive housing. The report also points to discriminatory practices, basically targeting people with mental health disabilities for this kind of housing.
And was there due process? Could people challenge being put in there?
Often, no. The report details discipline being handed out routinely, including long stretches in restrictive housing without basic due process. No fair hearings, people getting time-served sanctions without ever getting a chance to argue their case. Long punishments imposed with no real opportunity to be heard.
Just punishment without process.
Pretty much. And one final point from the DOJ report, which is shocking. A failure to provide legally required special education services to 17-year-olds with disabilities.
They're legally entitled to that under federal law, the idea.
Exactly. A clear violation.
Yeah.
These kids, already facing huge challenges, denied a fundamental right to education and stuck in this incredibly harmful environment, sometimes in restrictive housing. It's just layer upon layer of failure.
It's a truly damning picture. A system in deep, deep crisis, just like that opening line said.
Yeah. And like we said at the start, these kinds of problems, they don't seem to be just in Fulton County. That recent escape in New Orleans, it kind of shines a light on similar issues elsewhere, doesn't it?
It really does. 10 inmates getting out through a hole behind a toilet. I mean, that points directly to infrastructure problems, security lapses, oversight issues, themes we just heard about in the Fulton report.
Right, and the district attorney in New Orleans called out systemic problems there, too. Said the sheriff's office wasn't providing evidence needed to prosecute earlier jail crimes like contraband smuggling or assaults inside the jail.
So a lack of accountability, potentially hindering efforts to control the situation inside.
Exactly. And the DA also worried about housing dangerous people together again, that classification issue, and what seemed like a lack of real-time monitoring. It all sounds disturbingly familiar after reading the Fulton County findings.
It really underscores that these aren't necessarily isolated incidents, but might reflect wider vulnerabilities.
And thinking about vulnerabilities, it makes you think, even historically, about Alcatraz.
Ugh, the Great Escape.
Frank Morris, the Anglin brothers, 1962. That's a whole different level of security, obviously. Maximum security, federal prison, The Rock.
Totally different league. But the ingenuity, widening air vents, making those incredibly realistic dummy heads out of soap and toilet paper and hair.
Yeah, fooling the guards for hours and building a raft out of raincoats. It's amazing.
And it really is. And the fact that we still don't know for sure if they made it or drowned, that mystery just adds to it. But even though it's historical and a max security place, it kind of speaks to that constant challenge, doesn't it?
Yeah.
That determined people will try to find and exploit any weakness.
Absolutely. It's a reminder that no system is foolproof. And while the scale and context are different from Fulton County or New Orleans today, that underlying theme of vulnerability, of the potential for breach, it resonates.
Yeah. And on a much more mundane but still very serious level, that other report we mentioned, a maintenance worker just doing their job getting threatened by an inmate, it's easy to forget the risks staff face every single day in these places. Definitely. A constant state of tension and potential danger for everyone inside, staff included. So when you put it all together, the deep dives into Fulton County, the New Orleans escape, Alcatraz as a historical marker, the threat to staff, it really paints this picture of complex, interconnected problems in our correctional systems.
Yeah, it's not just one thing, is it? It's infrastructure, it's staffing, it's oversight, it's maybe even the basic philosophy of how we handle incarceration. Systemic weaknesses seem to be the common thread.
So, as we wrap this up, what are the main things that you think people should take away from all this?
Well, first, the sheer scale of crisis described in Fulton County is undeniable. The violence, the neglect in medical and mental health care, the facility just falling apart, it's deeply disturbing. And crucially, it's probably not unique. The New Orleans escape hints at similar issues elsewhere. Even Alcatraz reminds us breaches happen.
Yeah, the human cost really stands out to me. The deaths that could have been prevented, the violence, the suffering, especially for vulnerable people, those with mental health issues, the young people. It just screams for reform. What detail sticks with you the most?
Honestly, two things. The sheer number of broken locks in Fulton County hundreds, it just symbolizes the decay. And then The dummy heads from Alcatraz. The ingenuity is just mind-boggling. How about you?
For me, it's probably the story of Mr. Thompson dying covered in lice due to neglect. It's such a horrific image of system failure, and maybe that man released with schizophrenia and active psychosis, the system failing people at every stage.
Yeah. And it's important for people listening for you to remember this isn't some isolated issue far removed from daily life. It touches on fundamental questions about justice in our society, about safety, about how we treat people in state custody. Understanding this stuff is really vital if we want to have informed conversations about change.
Absolutely. Which leads to the question for you, the listener. What are the ripple effects of these conditions? Not just on the people inside, but on families, on communities when people are eventually released, often in worse shape. And how do we push for real accountability and meaningful reforms? Maybe, look into what's happening in your own local jails. Are there initiatives trying to make things better?
Good point. And maybe one last thought to leave you with, sort of a provocative one. If Alcatraz, the rock, the supposedly inescapable prison, could be breached through ingenuity and exploiting weaknesses, what does that suggest about the vulnerabilities that might exist in countless other jails and prisons across the country right now?